They say curiosity is a key that unlocks both fortune and disaster. But what if I told you that for one man, it led to something far worse, a fate neither rich nor poor could ever escape? This is a story that was whispered through the sands of time, a story that some believe was never meant to be told. But since you're here, listening, let me warn you, once you hear this tale, you can never forget it. It all began with a simple man named Hassan. He was a merchant in a quiet village, nestled between the golden dunes of Arabia. He was neither rich nor poor, but he had enough to live peacefully. He sold fabrics, spices, and trinkets to passing travelers, never expecting anything extraordinary to happen. Until one night when a stranger arrived. The market was closing, and most merchants had packed up. But this man, wrapped in a dark, tattered cloak, walked straight to Hassan's stall. His face was hidden beneath a deep hood, and his voice was nothing more than a whisper against the desert wind. He placed an ancient golden key on the wooden counter. "This belongs to you now," the man said, his voice dry like sandpaper. "But remember, never open the door, it unlocks." Hassan stared at the key, its surface covered in strange carvings. Before he could ask anything, the traveler was gone. Hassan held the key in his trembling hands. It was heavier than it looked, cold as metal left in the shadows. What door was the traveler speaking of? That night, curiosity gnawed at him like a starving beast. He searched his house, running his fingers over the walls, shelves, and floors, and then he found it. Behind an old dusty bookshelf, tucked away in the corner of his home, was something he had never noticed before. A door. It was made of dark, polished wood, with an identical golden lock that matched the key perfectly. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The traveler's warning echoed in his mind. Never open the door. But how could he resist? For hours, Hassan sat before the door, key in hand, debating. Maybe it's nothing, he whispered to himself. Maybe it's a treasure hidden by my ancestors. The temptation was unbearable. With a deep breath, his fingers trembled as he slid the key into the lock. He turned it slowly. Click! The lock opened. At first, there was nothing, just darkness. A hallway stretched beyond the door, its walls smooth as glass, lit by flickering lanterns that seemed to float on their own. A cold wind rushed past him, carrying whispers. Not in any language he knew, not from in front of him, not from behind him, but from inside his own mind. Hassan hesitated. Every part of him screamed to turn back. But he took a step forward, then another. The hallway twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense. One moment, it felt like he was going downwards. The next, he was climbing. Then he heard it, a voice, faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Hassan, is that you?" His breath caught in his throat. It was his father's voice. But that was impossible. His father had died years ago. Hassan's steps quickened, the walls narrowing around him, suffocating. And then he stopped. The hallway had opened into a vast, circular room. Lining the walls were mirrors, dozens of them, each one reflecting something different. One mirror showed him as a boy, playing in the village. Another reflected him as an old man, withered and tired. Then his eyes landed on a mirror that did not reflect him at all. Instead, a shadow stood there, watching, smiling. "You opened the door," it whispered. Hassan stumbled back. His reflection in the other mirrors twisted, faces melting into strange, grotesque versions of himself. He turned to run, but the door was gone. The room began to crumble. The mirrors cracked, their surfaces bleeding black liquid. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, screaming, and then silence. When Hassan opened his eyes, she was no longer in the hallway. He was standing in the middle of the desert. His house, his shop, his village all gone. The golden key was still in his hand, but now it was covered in sand and rust, as if it had been buried for hundreds of years. Then he realized he was no longer the same man. His hands were wrinkled. His beard, once black, was now pure white. For Hassan, only a few moments had passed. But in the real world, 100 years had gone by. No one knows where Hassan went after that. Some say he wandered the desert, searching for the door to return. Others believe he was never meant to leave that place, and what walked out wasn't really him. The golden key was later found by another traveler. And just like before, someone whispered, "This belongs to you now. But remember, never open the door, it unlocks." Some doors are meant to stay closed. But tell me, if you had the key, Would you open it? Let me know in the comments. And if you love mysterious tales, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because who knows? The next story might just find you.